everyone and welcome. My name is Rachel.
And I am Andrew.
And we are Picture the Scene podcast, a true crime podcast aiming to put you, the listener, at the scene of the crime. We bring you a new episode on a weekly basis, with Andrew mainly focusing on lesser known crimes from the UK and Ireland. However, sometimes I like to take on the bigger, more well-known cases from time to time. As we are a true crime podcast, we must warn you that listener caution is advised. Today's case is entitled Limbs in the Loch and takes us on a trip back to the 90s and an awful murder in Scotland. It was actually inspired by a recent show I attended at the local theatre called The Makings of a Murderer, where retired detective David Swindle, known by our true crime fans as the man who brought serial killer Peter Tobin to justice, delves into the minds of some of the UK's most notorious serial killers. This particular case, he kind of touched on a little bit, and I was immediately interested and wanted to find out more, so here we are.
Looking forward to hearing it then, Rach.
Cool. Well, before we get to it, if you do happen to like what you hear, please do follow us on whatever social media platforms you prefer, and wherever you listen, if you have the capability, why not give us a rating and review as well? These ratings and reviews mean so much to us, not only because we love hearing from our wonderful listeners, but it also encourages new listeners to come find us and give us a try. So thank you for your ratings and reviews. We appreciate every single one of them.
We do indeed.
And if you like us that much that you want to support us, you can do so now for less than the cost of a small Americano on Patreon, with our sign-up starting as low as £1. We release bonus content every month, and we also take recommendations from our Patreon subscribers.
We do indeed.
Supporting our pod also means the world to us, so thank you to each and every one of you. And finally, for now, the links to our social medias and Patreon can be found in the show notes or by visiting patreon.com/scenepod. That's patreon.com/SCENEPOD.
Indeed, Rachel. And I just want our listeners to know that already we are 2 or 3 minutes in, and Rachel is already being quite bossy towards me. So I think it's going to be one of those days today. But and if you join our Patreon, you get our bonus episode, our latest bonus episode, Rachel. The consensus seems to be that our Patreon listeners think I have enjoyed my evil laugh. I think I have an evil laugh. So if you're wondering what I'm talking about, well, listen to our latest Patreon bonus episode.
Yep, you'll have to subscribe. And this is actually the third attempt of us recording this episode, guys. And the last attempt, Andrew had thrown in there that we were now officially back on TikTok and YouTube. So I feel like that should be something that we address.
I completely forgot about that. We are officially on YouTube and TikTok. Oh, we never really left, but YouTube, we've been releasing an episode every single week for the last, since midway through season 2. So they're not very exciting, like visual wise, but you can hear us if you prefer YouTube. And TikTok, well, we do our best. We're not teenage girls, so we're not quite TikTok savvy, but we got in the high hundreds for people watching our stuff.
Nice. You can tell Andrew's not a salesman. Nothing particularly visually savvy, but we do our best.
Yes.
Actually, last recording as well that obviously got canned. Andrew was making some great facial expressions. So I think at some point we're going to have to record our actual recording so that people get to see us and what we look like when we're recording the show. Because I just think the listeners need to see some of these facial expressions, Andrew.
I think we'll do a live one for Patreon at some point soon, but also I think we need some consensus among our listeners. I feel like I'm being bullied today by Rachel. When we finish, I'm just going to go in a corner and start crying.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Wow, pulling strange facial expressions.
I feel bad now. I'm sorry. Forgive me.
You should feel bad. She says she feels bad, listeners, with a huge smile on her face. So I don't believe her. But we'll do a live one on Patreon soon. Shall we commit to it now, Rachel?
Yes. Yeah.
Since we've not planned this, we're recording this on the 22nd of May. We release this in June, I believe.
I've got an idea.
Okay. Well, okay. What's your idea?
Yeah, how about we have an exclusive live for our Patreon subscribers mid-July, and during the live we'll do a draw of all of our subscribers on that date, and some lucky people will win some merch that we've not even created yet. Some exclusive picture of the scene merch.
Okay, that sounds like I'm not a big fan of impromptu suggestions that are on the recording, but we'll say that, and I'll pop up a poll at some point soon on Patreon for the best time of day and day to actually do the live.
Okay, cool. Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, before we get into today, how have you been since we last recorded?
Well, I've been good, busy, but
Just
good.
good.
Good. She doesn't like it when I don't say sparkling people, so I've been slightly sparkling, like some good sparkling water from Marks and Spencer's.
Oh, that is a fine brand of sparkling water. Other brands are available. Nice. Okay. So all that's left for me to ask is, are you ready for some true crime?
Yes.
Wow. Are you sure? I feel like you had to think about that.
Because I was trying to think of something funny, but I couldn't think of anything funny. So,
Okay,
yes.
you took a while. Okay. So today we're going to start the episode with an introduction to William Frederick Ian Beggs. Born on the 4th of October 1963, one of 5 children to parents William and Winifred Beggs, and raised in the town of Portadown in Northern Ireland. There isn't much documented about Beggs' childhood, aside from the fact he was raised in a deeply religious household and was a bit of a creepy loner type at school. By his early teens, however, he was known for showing an unhealthy interest in younger boys, something that would lead him to fleeing his home by the time he finished school, due to the rumours of his lust for boys starting to circulate. By 1982, aged just 19, he'd settled in Middlesbrough in the northeast of England to commence further education. However, it wouldn't be long until he started appearing on local police database.
By young boys, because you said they started in school, so they must be very young then.
Yeah.
Okay.
So younger than him, but yeah, he was also in school. But yeah, he would and by all accounts, from what I read, he enjoyed the control factor that he had over being older than them, telling them what to do, and obviously then started that kind of started becoming more concerning.
Yes, I get you.
Over the next 5 years, Beggs would be linked to 14 horrific slashing attacks across the north of England. And as we often see with criminals, activity escalates quickly, and Beggs was no different. Only a year after graduating in 1987, he picked up what we believe to be his first murder victim, 28-year-old student Barry Oldham, from a local gay bar in Newcastle. Luring him back to his apartment, he'd go on to butcher Barry Oldham with a knife and a razor, trying to cut his head off and arms and legs in the process, and dumping his body in the North Yorkshire moors. Days later, one of his college friends was watching television with Beggs when a photo fit of the suspect wanted in connection to the death flashed up on the screen. Her blood ran cold and she immediately informed the police. This same friend would go on to give evidence at the murder trial, where Beggs would be found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment. He was finally safe behind bars.
Imagine this, Rachel. You're in, what year was this, sorry?
1987.
So it's 1987. It's 30 odd years ago. So it's not that long really in years, but even then, attitudes towards women was a lot different than it is now. So you're a young woman, sat with a guy who watching TV, and suddenly an Ethy comes on where you know it's him. You'd be for want of a better description, you'd be crapping yourself, wouldn't you? Because you wouldn't want to escape, because it was like one of those bad horror movies. What if they try and stop you escaping, but it's going to sit there, and what will you do? That'd be such a weird situation to be in.
Yeah, and when people would joke with him about his crimes and whether he was a suspect, he would make comments back that would make women especially feel very uncomfortable. Comments like, yeah, and you could be next. He would never deny
Wow.
his involvement in cases. And I'm not saying that this happened with this particular individual when that photo fit flashed up on the screen, but certainly with his other crimes, he'd make people feel uncomfortable when they were saying, "Oh gosh, that guy looks like you," and they were like, "Well, you could be my next victim," and like, just very creepy, unsettling behavior like that.
Yeah, wow, like, what a thing to say, but yeah. Anyway, sorry to interrupt. Carry on.
Don't apologise. Following the trial, the detective responsible for investigating the Beggs' case commented, "We got lucky. We caught and arrested this man after his first murder. We've caught a serial killer in the making here." So the eagle-eyed and eared of you out there will have heard me say that he picked up his first murder victim in 1987. So you're also probably thinking, well, he got a life sentence and is in jail. So what's going on here? Well, just 2 years after sentencing, in 1989, Beggs was actually freed on a legal technicality. As the Court of Appeal judges ruled, the trial judge had allowed the jury to hear evidence on a number of serious assaults on other men, which bore a resemblance to his attack on Barry Oldham. This would later be deemed prejudicial. Hence, he was a free man, regardless of guilt. And due to the double jeopardy law in the UK at the time, he could not be retried for this case.
Do you know what I'm thinking, Rachel? I asked you this question before, that, surely that'd be okay by the judge to do that. But thinking about that when you said that then, and don't worry, people, this is roughly the space where we stopped recording last time, so I'm going to stop saying I said this before, but nowadays they don't introduce previous crimes, do they, at all? And
No,
so
they don't.
I'm guessing this will be one of the reasons why.
Yeah, because it's deemed prejudicial towards the case, and he was convicted of those previous crimes. But the obviously the prosecution are painting a picture of the person, up for on the murder charges. They're painting a picture of him with past behaviour, which the
Yeah,
court of justice agreed could not be done.
that makes
Uh,
sense. That makes sense. And well, it's not good to let someone see. The thing is, like, would he have been like? Let's say they would never have done that. Would he have been found guilty anyway?
oh, likely, yeah.
And so,
So Barry's blood was found all over his flat. He was seen with him leaving the bar. Like there was so much other evidence.
wow,
Um, but the judge allowed for that evidence to be entered into trial, i.e., the previous assaults. So and the judge to this day still stands by the fact that he should have been allowed to allow that in court. He feels like the Court of Appeal, I called them the courts of justice before, it's the Court of Appeal, he feels that they were overly critical on the case and needn't have been allowing a murderer to walk free.
yeah. You see, actually, at first I would agree with that, but just at the point of reference, it shouldn't be like past crimes shouldn't be. They should be introduced when it comes to sentencing, but not prior to conviction. So it's just a shame that he let it in, because if he was going to be found guilty anyway, then it's kind of the judge's fault, I would say.
Well, lucky for you, that is the way of the world now.
Yes, indeed.
So after Beggs' release, he moved around England and Ireland, but eventually settled down in Kilmarnock, Scotland, where he found work as an estate management officer. Somehow managing to cover up his previous history and the court case, he kept it all from the public eye. But it didn't take long for his true colours to shine through. That creepy behaviour that was noted by his childhood friends was on display once again, with neighbours, years later, in his local block of flats nicknaming him Fred West. It wasn't long until he was back to his old tricks, but this time he had infiltrated the local scouts group, making it to assistant leader by 1990, where he gained the trust of those around him and became responsible for trips and time with the young boys, aged just 11 to 16. Don't forget, by this time, he would be early 30s.
All I can say is it's lucky. One
No,
of
he
the
wouldn't. No, he wouldn't. Sorry. Don't forget, by this time, he'd be in his early 20s.
All I can say it's lucky that they have DBS checks now, because even if he would have been found not guilty, which he was by technicality, an enhanced DBS check, which is what he would have had to deal with kids nowadays, it doesn't just show convictions; it shows notes against on people's files. So even his conviction and overturn would be on there, so he wouldn't be near the children anyway. So at least nowadays it shows a good thing that we have the vetting for child safety.
Yeah, and don't forget he'd been charged for those 14 slashings
Oh yeah,
on that
yeah.
local police database. So it would have shown his violence as well. Yeah. It took over a year for scouting chiefs to find out the truth about Beggs, following an anonymous tip-off that he'd been convicted in court of serious offences. And only less than a month later, he was also suspended from his full-time position and eventually sacked.
Good.
Good. This turbulent time in his professional life led Beggs back to his violent, impulsive ways. He was soon out scouting bars and clubs for drunk gay men, who he would turn extremely unpleasant on after sex. And needless to say, it wasn't long before he was back in police custody in July 1991, this time for a razor attack on Brian McQuillian, a former church worker. He was charged and eventually sentenced to 6 years for the attack. However, he was freed early on good behaviour, despite his past convictions. And just 3 years after the original sentencing, he was back living in his apartment in Kilmarnock by July 1994. His neighbours, following his time in jail, had tried to have him evicted, but somehow Beggs managed to purchase his flat and actually installed security lights and tiny video cameras in the air ducts so he could keep tabs and monitor the entire street.
Wow. This guy's got no shame. He's got
It's so odd. And
yeah.
Don't forget, obviously I'd alluded to before they'd nicknamed him Fred West. He'd have been back on that street in 94, around about the time that obviously Fred was convicted or, caught.
You would think, wouldn't you, if you're a sex offender, which is what he was, a sex offender, a violent sex offender, who people don't want you near them, living near them. They know about your past. They even nickname you Fred West. You think that you would do your best to go somewhere where no one knows you.
You'd want to distance yourself, wouldn't
Yeah.
you? Start fresh.
Yeah,
Well,
but yeah, definitely. I don't understand it. Unless he enjoyed it, he got off on people thinking he was that type of person.
yeah. Well, he obviously fled Northern Ireland when he was in his late teens because he feared for his life. Because people essentially, let's not put too fine a point on it, had him marked as a paedophile, right? Maybe at that point he kind of turned around and went, never again. I'm not running away from who I am. Just don't know, do you?
No, I guess he couldn't have stood his ground in Northern Ireland, or especially it being such a religious community, whichever side you fall on, and also such a violent place as well at that time.
Yeah. Well, unsurprisingly, Beggs was able to once again cover up his past misdemeanors, and this time he managed to secure a placement on a postgraduate course at university, also becoming a mentor for the younger students who were embarking on their university life for the first time. So by this point, Beggs was 31 years of age, with over 10 separate police convictions, and yet he was able to support and be present in the UK education system. Over the next 5 years, he was closely monitored by local enforcement and contacted several times regarding investigations both into murder and serious assault. And get this, each time he just refused to cooperate and nothing more was done.
Yeah, well, there you go. I don't know what
Can
to
you
say
believe
to
it?
that. I know, just imagine that. Imagine.
You're wanted in connection with this crime. Can you please contact us?
No.
No.
Okay then. Never mind. Sorry to bother you.
Pretty much. However, that all stopped on the 4th of December, 1999. So, listeners, if it's safe for you to do so, I'd like you all to sit back, relax, and picture the scene. We're taking you back to the evening of the 4th of December, 1999, to the bustling town of Kilmarnock, the largest in the county of Ayrshire, with a population of just under 50,000. On this particular day, the skies were mostly cloudy but dry, and the air was cool. That typical crisp weather we've all come to expect in the UK just before Christmas, with temperatures reaching highs during the day of 5 degrees Celsius, that's 41 degrees Fahrenheit, and lows that evening of -1, that's 30 degrees Fahrenheit. So bearing in mind it's -1, it'll come as quite a surprise that Barry Wallace, aged just 18 at the time, had decided to make his way home from his work night out by foot, and on that fateful evening would be involved in a case that shocked the local community to its core.
I don't think it would be a surprise. What year was this?
You're joking me, it's 1999 and it's -1. Get
So
a
when
taxi, man.
So I was 18 in 1998.
Ooh.
I used to, I don't drink anymore. When I used to drink, I used to walk from the town centre. I lived in a small Midlands town at the time. I used to walk from the town centre to home, a few miles, maybe 3-4 miles. And when I was very drunk, which was quite often, I always used to take my top off and walk back topless, no matter how cold it was or warm. So to me, that's
Why?
not a surprise. I don't know. It's just like when I was drunk, I think it helped me not throw up. I think. I don't know, actually. I don't, you know, it's like when you're drunk, you don't have really sensible thoughts, but I always used to just walk along. And no, I never used to get a taxi because I never had any money left by the end of the night.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I assume you never walked topless on the way home, Rachel. That'd be a strange thing. That's
No,
probably
and I
like
also never
the-
walked home. Like, that's just wild.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
I mean, there's two things, right? I live in a very small community where the streetlights kind of go off at like 11:30 or whatever.
Really?
Yeah.
Love
So
it.
it's not like particularly safe at the best of times to walk home. But also, people on the roads are just a bit nuts, especially around Christmas. Like, you get your drink drivers, don't you? So you just
Yeah.
don't know whether you're going to be like safe walking the dark roads when, for the sake of like a tenner or £15, you can get in a taxi, or for £3 you can hop on a bus. So I guess, listeners, it depends who you are and where you live as to whether or not you'll be surprised by that. I personally was surprised.
I guess it depends on if you're middle class or above or not. Maybe. Leave that out.
You saying I'm middle class?
Okay, no, don't leave that out then. No, just you were probably a much nicer teenager than me, Rachel.
Why, thank you. So, Barry Wallace, a shy but popular teenager, was working as a supermarket shelf stacker and contemplating a career in the Royal Navy back in 1999. But on the evening of the 4th of December, after a night of heavy drinking with his work colleagues at the office Christmas party, he parted ways, and sometime later his path merged with William Beggs. Barry Wallace would never be seen alive again. Whilst the exact time of that Beggs encountered Barry Wallace on the 4th remains uncertain, he would later go on to brag about a sweet young man with whom he'd had a sexual encounter with that evening. What is indisputable is that Beggs brought the young man back to his apartment. There he brutally attacked Barry, shackling his limbs with handcuffs, striking his face, piercing his arm with a needle, and subjecting him to a horrific sexual assault. The severity of this assault led medical experts to suggest that shock may have been the cause of Barry's death.
Wow. So he drugged him or just pierced him?
Yeah, no, he drugged him. And a pattern, like something I didn't really touch on earlier. When he was, remember the church worker that he was sentenced for 6 years in jail for attacking? The church worker had kind of woken up in a daze. He'd come round and he felt a lot of pain in his legs, and Beggs was essentially like hacking away at his legs, trying to get to the bone. So yeah, he obviously drugged his victims to sedate them to start the assault. But yeah, some of them obviously woke up. Whether that was him misdosing, or maybe he never intended to kill, and overdosed in error. I don't know, but Yeah, with this particular guy and with others, there was a pattern of him drugging them.
Fair enough.
Barry had put up one hell of a fight for his life. One forensic specialist testified that the damage caused by the handcuffs was the most severe she'd ever seen.
Wow.
After Barry had died, Beggs proceeded to dismember his body. He discarded the arms and legs in Loch Lomond and threw the head from the Troon to Belfast ferry. Police divers on a training course on the 6th of December, so just 2 days later, discovered human limbs in Loch Lomond, north of Glasgow. A full-scale search then recovered more body parts in the days and weeks ahead.
Wow, that's a bit of a coincidence. A great coincidence, but just
Absolutely.
to randomly find them. I assume they never found the head.
Wow. The head was later discovered on Barassi Beach on December 15th by, can you guess?
A dog walker.
A dog walker. A woman
There we
this
go.
time walking her dog. Barry Wallace was only able to be laid to rest on the 29th of February 2000, 87 days after he was last seen alive.
Yeah, the older I get, the more it beggars belief how people can do such things. I don't understand how you can take pleasure from these things, and you have to do such things.
Imagine, though, your son is reported missing, which his dad did, like, in the early hours of the next day, and limbs start turning up 2 days later, but you can't lay him to rest because his body is scattered all over the place. The prolonged torture that this man put the family through because of that is just, like, it's unnecessary that he died, but it's further necessary that it lasts 87 days of not being able to put that body to rest. And I'm not sure whether Barry's family were particularly religious, but there's a process in grieving, isn't there, of laying the body to rest. And how many victims of crime do we hear where there's no body to be found and there's no peace for the family that's left behind?
Exactly. Yeah, no, I don't think it's a religious thing or not. You're right. It's part of the process. How it's like being able to say a final goodbye. You never get over it, do you? But
No.
it's a step in the process.
Mm-hmm. Beggs's apartment was searched by the police just 2 days after those first body parts were found, on the 8th of December. His name had reportedly lit up the police database like a festive display. Beggs had attempted to erase any evidence by completely redecorating his apartment and removing the carpets. However, forensic experts discovered over 20 bloodstains, including a trace of Mr. Wallace's blood on a kitchen knife found in the apartment.
Wow.
However, at the time of the raid, Beggs was not at home. He'd spent the night in Edinburgh after a work event. And upon hearing news of the investigation on the radio, he went on the run. His flight sparked an international search, culminating 2 weeks later when Beggs turned himself in to a police station in Amsterdam. Beggs initially resisted being extradited back to Scotland to face trial, but in January 2001, so nearly a year after the search on his apartment and the police hunt for him, a team of Dutch judges determined that he should be returned to face trial for the awful crimes committed, and Beggs was finally extradited to Scotland. Whilst Beggs was on the run, the lead investigator in the case, Detective Superintendent William Prendergast of Strathclyde Police, led a team of detectives in what was described as one of the largest investigations ever conducted by the force, spanning several weeks and involving a large number of officers, forensic experts, and other specialists to ensure they had a rock-solid case to bring to trial. And finally, on the 18th of September 2001, 38-year-old Beggs went on trial at the High Court in Edinburgh for the murder of Barry Wallace. Only 24 days later, the jury found him guilty and sentenced him to life in prison. After delivering their majority verdict to the court, it was revealed to the jury that Beggs was once cleared of a similar murder by appeal court judges on a technicality back in 1989.
Oh, could have been preventable then.
But how good would that jury have felt? Because they didn't know that. They were trying him for that one case in isolation, but knowing that he had past history.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. It makes me wonder.
I think that would have made you feel all the more like that you'd served your purpose as a jury.
Yeah, justification that you got the right answer.
Yeah. At sentencing, trial judge Lord Osborne said, "Having regard to the circumstances of the case, in particular the seriousness of the appalling offences involved, and having regard to your previous convictions," so there's your nod, Andrew, at sentencing. This part of your sentence, which must be specified, is 20 years. But given Beggs's past history, it is unlikely he will ever see freedom. Following the trial, Prendergast was credited with overseeing a thorough and meticulous investigation that ultimately led to the arrest, trial, and conviction of Beggs. And I wanted to put that in there because, again, like, we cover a lot of cases on Picture the Scene, and we hear our fellow podcasters cover a lot of cases on their pods that are really well run by the police and investigation teams. But we also hear a lot of cases where the police have not done everything they could have possibly done for a watertight case. They've got issues with evidence going missing, being mishandled, questions being thrown up. But there was one thing that was shining through from a lot of the research that I did on this particular case, and it was the meticulous kind of work that the detective and his team did in order to secure this conviction, especially when Beggs was on the run for the year, trying to stay in Amsterdam. They had the time, I guess, to make sure everything was watertight.
Like the one in New Zealand that you covered as well.
Yeah.
Makes me think, though, there's no way that he would have not killed between the one he got away with and this one, is there? Surely.
That's really interesting that you say that. There's a number of people that think, there are more bodies in the background. Obviously, he refused to participate in the investigations of a murder victim and a couple of horrific attacks as well. Like, he just point out, right, refused to corroborate. So, yeah, you're absolutely right.
You'd think that just logic, like what we know, logic speaking, you don't just turn it off, do you? And then turn it back on 10 years later.
No, absolutely. Fully agree with you. Barry Wallace's parents, Ian, 51, and Christine, 50, along with his brother Colin, 23, gave a moving statement outside the court. Our Barry was a normal, healthy, fun-loving teenager whose only mistake in this whole sordid episode was to be in the wrong place at the wrong time and fall prey to this monster, a mistake which cost him his life. We are glad that this devil's trail of death and destruction has finally been halted, and no other innocent child or family will have to suffer in future. Isn't it awful, though, for them to have found out that it could have been prevented had he not have been let off in 89?
It's awful. I mean, I hear those things, and part of me thinks it'd be good for them not to hear that. But obviously, we're not in a perfect world, and it's going to come out, and they're going to hear it, and it's just anger, and it's just, yeah.
How often as well do we hear it in these cases that we cover of being in the wrong place at the wrong time? It's like so unfortunate. And if it wasn't Barry Wallace, it would have been someone else.
Yeah, there's this whole thing of people say you can't say in the wrong place at the wrong time. But I never understood why you can't, because it's not a person's fault where they are, is it? But it still can be the wrong place at the wrong time. Doesn't mean they've done wrong. But yeah, you're right. It's if like the one we covered, I guess people won't know, but the one we covered on Patreon recently, if it wouldn't have been that victim, it would have been another victim, wouldn't it?
Yeah. They're out there with a purpose, aren't they?
Yeah.
To take a life, and they'll get to their means and their end by any way.
Which is why I don't think he would have just not killed again. Because the way you mention it, that's a sort of, it's not like, say, for example, you hear about two people getting in a fight and one punches them and the other one falls over, hits his head and dies. Like, obviously that's not good, but that's not premeditated. And yeah, it's more of an accidental death, isn't it? But these ones, I mean, they've obviously taken pleasure from how they've killed. So I just don't see how. I think it might take years to get to that point where they can kill, but once they kill, I don't see how they can put that back in a bottle.
Yeah. And it was said as well, I don't want to praise him at all, but it was said that Beggs was incredibly intelligent. So, it wouldn't have cost him a lot of time to be thinking and making calculated moves. And obviously Barry Wallace was very quickly identified as a missing person because he lived at home with his parents. But you don't know what kind of victims Beggs may have gone after that didn't have families or homes to go to and people looking for them or watching out for them.
And especially at that time when it wasn't the internet or anything like that. I
Yeah,
guess it was internet in 99, but you
circulating.
know what I mean. But yeah,
Yeah,
it
but
wasn't as
still,
wide, yeah.
the mass, like the majority of people wouldn't be reading the news on the internet, would they? They'd still be
Yeah.
newspaper. Rather sickeningly, Beggs has actually gone on to lodge several appeals on his conviction, specifically against his human rights. But he's also submitted his request to the European Court of Human Rights to award him cash compensation for the alleged delays to his trial. So he asked for compensation of up to €16,000 for the delays that it took to get him to trial. But just as a reminder, listeners, he caused those delays because he fled to Amsterdam and he refused to return to Scotland for the trial.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. That's obviously, I'm sure these wasn't successful, were
No. He even had the audacity to request bail whilst the courts investigated his appeal. So I just feel like the man has zero boundaries. But what must be said is that the justice system upheld its end of the bargain, and thankfully he exhausted all of his options in appealing the initial 20-year sentence and that bid for compensation as well. So they were both denied. But yeah, he'd gone right through the process. He was treated unfairly, unfair delays in the trial. Lots of time and money spent that he can't get back. Like, who does he think he is?
they? Yeah.
But given it's 2023 and his sentencing was passed with a minimum term of 20 years back in 2001, he is able to apply for parole. However, given his track record, it's highly unlikely that this would ever be granted. But it does scare me to think that a parole board at some point could let this man out on the streets. So he'll turn 60 just later on this year. In my opinion, still has plenty of years left in him, plenty of life left in him. And has spent a 20-year stint in prison. So, if he was to be let out, who knows what kind of man he would be. And I know that we don't often kind of pass comment on this, and I definitely don't say it, but I fully believe that this man deserves to remain behind bars until he dies. I think that is one way to ensure that the general public is safe.
Yeah, I think when I think everyone has a chance, but to be able to be released, but you have to ensure that someone is not a danger to society. And I fail to believe how, with the number of convictions he's had, the way in which he's killed, and also the blatant disregard he's had for justice as well, with all the appeals and stuff. I don't personally see how he would be able to display that he's not a danger anymore.
And the fact that he hides bodies, like, he's it's not like he's a reckless criminal that goes on the rampage and can be found and tracked quite easily. He's got past, evidence of like disposing of body parts and cleaning his flat and being methodical with things like that. So yeah, where do you draw the line?
Exactly.
So this has been season 3, episode 5, entitled Limbs in the Loch. So Andrew, what do you think of the case?
Yeah, I didn't know that case. That was interesting. I'm going to do some research on him, I think, because I'm going to see what some of the theories are about him out there, because and see who he's being linked to, who he might have killed, because I don't think in any way he hasn't killed that. He's probably killed and we don't know.
Yeah.
Like, he's not being found guilty of.
It wasn't in the press and anything about his family. I wonder what they feel, being incredibly religious. He's got 4 siblings and parents potentially still alive, or at least at the time of the crime. I wonder whether they looked, and it was very well publicized case, front page of multiple newspapers and obviously on television as well, news. Wonder whether they were surprised seeing their big brother or son on national television.
Well, by the sounds of it, they probably weren't surprised that they saw him there, but probably not happy.
Okay, so for one last time, if it's safe for you to do so, I'd like you all to relax, to close your eyes and picture the scene. A late night drinking with work colleagues. You're happily drunk and refusing to wait for that taxi home. You quite possibly decide to walk home and take your top off in doing so. But what could possibly be the risk of that walk home?
Exactly. Don't take your top off, Rachel.
And don't walk home, listeners.
No, because they turn the lights off at 11:30. Who does that? What sort of place turns the lights off at 11:30? I know we're in an energy
Trying to save
crisis.
some gas and electricity.
Cause lots of traffic accidents. But yeah, anyway, thank you, listeners. Thank you, Rachel. Love it when you do a case. I've enjoyed that one.
Good. Thanks, guys. Until next time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.